The United States has begun to harvest global overseas capitalists. Li Ka-shing is not the first. But he is not the last either. Many capitalists will understand what capital without borders means. But capitalists have borders. The US and the UK will show them what it means to be fish on the chopping block. What it means to be a lamb ready for slaughter. When Donald Trump seized control of the Panama Canal, many thought it was just a campaign gimmick. But now, Li Ka-shing has obediently handed over control of his 43 global port assets. On March 4, Li Ka-shing's CK Hutchison Holdings announced an agreement with a consortium led by BlackRock. They will sell its core global port business for $22.8 billion. This includes a 90% stake in the Panama Port Company. Behind this is not just a business trade, but a major game related to national destiny. So how significant is this deal? Data shows that the Panama Canal connects the Pacific and Atlantic Oceans, carrying 5% of global maritime trade volume. Of that, 38% of trade goods are related to the East. And who did Li Ka-shing hand over control to? BlackRock. This is no ordinary capital group. Therefore, the U.S. financial hegemony manages assets worth over $10 trillion. It is closely tied to the United States. After this deal is completed, BlackRock will control 10.4% of global container throughput, deeply embedded in the Panama Canal's operational system, forming a strategic project with the U.S. What does this mean? It means the U.S. can strangle East's trade vessels at any time. Imagine if East and the U.S. encounter unknown conflicts in the future. At any time, the U.S. holds the throat of the Panama Canal. It can easily disrupt trade routes, imposing costs or restrictions on East. The Belt and Road Initiative may even be threatened. After all, it is uncertain when another port may be acquired. Thus, the Hong Kong Commercial Daily stated, "Great entrepreneurs are staunch patriots." On March 15, the Hong Kong and Macau Affairs Office fully reprinted the article. This indicates that the Hong Kong and Macau Affairs Office has characterized Li Ka-shing. Li Ka-shing's sale of the port not only sold his own assets, but also betrayed the strategic interests of the East. Li Ka-shing has repeatedly refused honors from the East, but has tearfully accepted British titles 3 times. This self-sabotaging behavior has transformed Li Ka-shing from a successful Hong Kong businessman into an international lamb. In the eyes of true Westerners, he is neither an Easterner nor a Briton. He is merely a lamb ready for slaughter. Why did the U.S. give the Panama Canal operations to Li Ka-shing? Because the canal was already very outdated. It needed massive funding for reconstruction. They sought someone easy to manipulate. After some renovations, they could reclaim over $20 billion from the West. They acquired port assets with net profits in the billions. This was an incredible profit. Why does the U.S. urgently need to control the Panama Canal? One significant reason is the unprecedented debt crisis facing the U.S. The national debt has reached $36 trillion, equivalent to 1/3 of global GDP. By January 2025, interest payments on the national debt will account for 18.7% of federal revenue. If this trend continues, the U.S. fiscal deficit will reach $2 to $3 trillion in 2 to 3 years, close to 10% of GDP. Interest expenses will rise from $1 trillion to $1.6 trillion. Nearly 2 years' worth of U.S. military spending. This is terrifying. Even Elon Musk has said that without spending cuts, the U.S. will face bankruptcy. In the face of such a predicament, the U.S. has 3 paths. First, default on the national debt. But this would collapse U.S. credit. Moreover, the largest holders of U.S. debt are Americans, which would cause domestic panic. Second, print money to repay debt. But the dollar is debt. Printing dollars will only create more debt. It will exacerbate inflation. Third, solve the problem by harvesting global assets. This is the route chosen by Trump. He aims to harvest the assets of global overseas capitalists, especially those wealthy individuals without strong national protection. As early as 2023, the US began targeting wealthy Chinese. The former Chinese tycoon, Zhao Changpeng, was directly arrested by the US. The US imposed a hefty fine of $7.2 billion. Zhao Changpeng accepted the penalty. But even so, he ended up in prison. Subsequently, other wealthy Chinese, Qin Hui and Wang Yanping, faced similar fates. The US is systematically harvesting the assets of overseas Chinese. Look at Xi, their situation hasn't improved much. Gorbachev believed the West's sweet talk. He thought that by accepting Western democracy and market economy, the Soviet Union would receive support from the West. The Soviet Union collapsed, and Russia fell into an unprecedented economic crisis. The West rejoiced in victory. Look at today's Russia-Ukraine conflict. Russia's overseas assets have been frozen by the West. All of Russia's overseas assets have been seized. This is the true face of the West. Nowadays, Li Ka-shing chooses global wealth across the world, especially choosing the so-called private property, sacred and inviolable in the West. The US aims to avoid bankruptcy. It must be increasingly difficult for him. This is the time for global assets. The affluent class is just right. The US's overseas sales indicate the end of globalization and the arrival of great power rivalry. The post-World War II world order was led by the US and Western countries. Global free trade and the free flow of capital. Multilateralism prevailed. During this period, businessmen like Li Ka-shing could deploy assets globally. They enjoyed the dividends of globalization. However, with the rapid growth of Eastern economic and military power, American hegemony began to falter. The Huawei breakthrough in 2023 marks Eastern advancement in high technology. Later, the sixth-generation fighter was commissioned. The launch of the giant ship created a big wave. These developments put unprecedented pressure on the US. The current international situation truly shifts from globalization to regionalization. From one hegemon to multiple hegemons. Super-rich individuals no longer seek protection from great powers. They risk becoming easy prey. Capital knows no borders. But capitalists do. What kind of face they have will determine whose side they are seen as being on. How many wealthy individuals have been harvested by American citizenship? Those who believe they can become global citizens will eventually discover it is merely a dream. Moreover, they will not be treated as insiders. They will only be seen as easy targets. Remember Gorbachev's lesson. Also remember Li Ka-shing's present situation. Without a strong homeland as support, no individual or enterprise can truly be strong. To address the $36 trillion US debt, the US would strip away the facade of the free market. It blatantly harvests global assets. To truly dominate the world, it cannot rely on capitalists, but on the power of the state. The rise of the East is the result of generations of shared struggle. The future international order will also be shaped by the East. Finally, pay attention. Note the strategic naming of the tavern. I will help you see through the clouds.